reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag and country. Thank you. I'm going to be jumping around on the agenda tonight because we have some guests from the League of Women Voters. Therefore, we will get to the minutes, announcements, and health officers report later on in the meeting so that our guests can make their presentation and go about the rest of their lives this evening. Recently, there's been some work and discussion and commentary and a study done by, among other things in that process, a study was done by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health under contract to the Delaware County Council with regard to a profile of health and public health service delivery in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. There's been a lot of discussion, as I've indicated, on that, and some groups and organizations have developed their own views on that issue. And among those groups is the League of Women Voters. And several representatives of that organization are with us today to talk about that issue, a very important issue that potentially could affect the lives of all residents of Delaware County. So at this point, I'd like to ask Rosemarie O'Malley-Halt to step up to the podium. We have a presentation by Ms. Holt on representing the League of Women Voters. Good evening, and thanks very much for coming out tonight to
thank you for having
talk to us. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So just a little background on myself. I am a registered pharmacist, and in 2005, I was president of the Delaware County Pharmacists Association. And at that time, we, if you think back to that time, there was a little spike in influenza, and it was very difficult to get flu vaccine. At that point, I began contacting the county in helping to see if we could help coordinate that response, and was shockingly told that we don't have a county health department. And at that point, that's how I got involved in it, and the Pharmacy Association then began contacting the League of Women Voters and to develop, a study to see what we could do to give information to the county to help them move forward in forming a county health department. So that's some of my initial background. Because of my involvement in this, I've actually gone back to graduate school, and I'm getting my master's in public health now. I've been immersed in it since 2005, and so I figured I might as well just go and make money at it, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so this presentation today is a combination of several presentations that we've given over the last couple of years, and it incorporates very briefly the information from Johns Hopkins, but in no way would I feel that I'm qualified to say everything that Johns Hopkins presented to the county council, but please take this as a summary. The complete document of the Johns Hopkins study is not available online. You have to go to county council, to Intercommunity Health, and actually in person request the document. They won't mail it to you. So if you want a copy, you have to go those routes. We're trying to get permission to put it online, but there is a summary document available on the Intercommunity Health website, and I also printed one copy of several documents of things that I've sent electronically for your records. So just a brief history of public health, of how this whole issue has evolved. In 1951, the Pennsylvania Senate and House enacted what we call Act 315, which governs county health departments. And so Act 315 says, among other things, it's a very long document, it basically says that counties can authorize formation of their own county health department. You have to be a certain size and meet the qualifications. If you do that and you get approval of the Pennsylvania Department of Health to do so, then you'll receive funding, which is 50% of that budget. Plus, you then qualify for federal grants that we cannot qualify without being a county health department, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So in 1968, so 1951, they enacted this. Some local areas formed a officially formed their health departments, including Philadelphia, which had a system at that time. In 1968, in Delaware County, a group called Citizens for Better Public Health Incorporated did a study, and this group was actually consisted of many doctors and organizations. There was over 20 organizations listed, and they actually had paid staff. I've talked to some of the members who are currently still living, and they had told me all about their program, and I actually have a copy of that for you too. That's not electronic. So basically that study told the county they needed a health department. Unfortunately, at that time there was Home Rule Charter and a lot of other political issues happening in the county, and the health department issue kind of got mushed into that whole movement. And nothing was really done. They did put it on the ballot. It did lose for the formation of the county health department, but by a very small amount. And according to the people who were on that group, they said that it lost pretty much because it got tied into the Home Rule Charter and people thought it would raise taxes. In 1972, in response to this study, Delaware County Council formed the Department of Intercommunity Health. But Delaware County Intercommunity Health, then and now, is not officially recognized as a health department, and it has no legal rights as a health department, and it can only serve as a resource group with the county giving direction. In January 2008, the League of Women Voters of Delaware County re-examined the issue from decades earlier consensus study that they had done in the early 1970s, and we decided that information had certainly changed since then, and we opened it up, and it turned out to be a 2-year study. In 2010, Delaware County releases the Johns Hopkins Review of Public Health and Services, so that's kind of where we're at today. And just to clarify, the Johns Hopkins study, it's confusing to some people. The Johns Hopkins study was not a feasibility study, which other counties like Lancaster County and have done. And the feasibility study is really a comprehensive review of not only the public health infrastructure of the county, but also the financial issues that go into forming a county health department, and it provides an initial outline of what that structure would have to be. So, and I know you're all heavily involved in public health here, but it's interesting just from my experience that if I went around the room, most people wouldn't know, would give me a different variation of what public health is. And nationally, what is an accepted definition is that what public health does is we monitor. So it's health status in order to identify community health problems, identify and investigate health problems and health hazards within the community, which you, as we were talking about the rabies incident, are doing, and educating people about health issues. That's the core functions. But then it went further. In 1994, they developed 10 key public health functions. And I'm bringing this up just so you understand that the services that are provided by the local municipalities fit only a small part of this larger 10 key public health functions. And that's not to say that nobody's doing a good job or anything, but it just with the resources available, you can only do so much. But ideally, we would have this part of the wheel that does assessment, policy development, assurance, and research are really critical parts to a modern-day health department. So there's 2 study methods, and I'm just going to compare the League of Women Voter Study and the Johns Hopkins. The League of Women Voter Study is actually a consensus study, and it was conducted over 2 years and consisted of interviews and a review of the current laws regarding public health in Pennsylvania, other Pennsylvania county health studies. Besides Delaware County, there is 5 other counties trying to get health departments in Pennsylvania right now. and they're part of a state network, actually, through the University of Pittsburgh. And those, Lancaster, York, are two of the ones that have done the larger studies. The Allentown-Lehigh Valley area actually is going to be the first new county health department in Pennsylvania since 1989, and they're going to be the first joint health department. Actually, there's two counties trying to do that together. It makes sense for them because of their geographic area and their hospital system. So they will be the first new county health departments in Pennsylvania, and so we actually looked at a lot of their documentation because that was the most recent. We also looked at health data, and we did site visits to the Pennsylvania Department of Health and also to Montgomery County Health Department, and any other pertinent documents, which there's hundreds. So John Hopkins' profile, compiled in 2009, includes an overview of Delaware County's current health and public health delivery structure, a compilation of community health status indicators, and an analysis of community health and public health needs, and the development of recommendations. Their study, while comprehensive, is kind of limited, and it was never designed to answer the question, do we need a county health department? They weren't even allowed to put that in their report, or put it in a way that when they were doing their surveys could be put in there. People had to write that part in. So just to be clear that that wasn't really the point of theirs. So when you're looking at the methods, keep that in mind from the information I'm giving you. So the League of Women Voters summary recommendations was that we needed a formation of a county-based health department that provides basic health services, monitors, targets, and identifies public health and safety issues, improves the health of residents, and promotes public education on these issues, coordinates response to public health and safety emergencies, and meets state and federal requirements. Pretty much you think of the wheel. That's what we're saying that we need in Delaware County. The John Hopkins recommendation, and please keep in mind that they're looking at it from a different perspective based on what they were asked to look for, was that first they said that the county lacked leadership in public health, that we needed to designate and develop a public awareness and recognition of a Delaware County public health leader, that there was limited collaboration, communication, and coordination, and they felt that we need to build on existing public health efforts through increased collaboration of communication and coordination. And I spoke to them about this, and they're referring to, we have 49 municipalities in Delaware County. We have 6 health systems. We have a lot of nonprofits that do public health. And so they felt that there should be increased communication between all those groups. Research to strengthen the infrastructure and obtain additional resources. And so they felt that we needed further research on how best to enhance the county's public health system, with particular regard to strengthening infrastructure and obtaining additional resources. Again, you think back to that wheel, they're trying to tell us that we need to really improve that. We don't really have that, the ability to do that kind of research. And they're also really referring to doing a feasibility study. Oversight and evaluation, establish a county public health task force or other entity with the responsibility and authority to oversee and evaluate the implementation of these recommendations. So the only problem that we had with this part of that, of their oversight and evaluation, is Delaware County already has a task force that they set up, but they've never had public meetings. And so there was some discussion within the league of saying, we kind of already have something like this. Are we adding on to this, or are we changing it? And we asked for clarification, but they said that would be up to the county, how they're going to structure this. And we have not heard. The only thing we have been told is that Mario Severa, who's new to county council, will be in charge of this aspect of development. So the two studies, there's some points that are similar to our studies, in that both studies really focused on leadership, and that there was no centralization in the county. Now, I know if you think, you guys, I know that they're inter-community health, you communicate through Radnor, am I correct? There's some representation with the inter-community health meetings. There are other boards of health and other organizations in the county apparently meet like once a month, we've been told. So still there was the feeling that there's really no centralized leader. If there was an emergency in the county, you know, particularly public health, that really legally falls to the Pennsylvania Department of Health if it goes beyond what your municipality can do. And we also had a major concern, and so did Johns Hopkins, that 9 municipalities in Delaware County have no public health board, officer, nothing. They totally rely on the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Department of Agriculture. There's concerns about the health indicators for the county, and you know, that's a complex issue, but there's certainly areas of concern, particularly in obesity, which is obviously a national concern, but there's concerns with significant pockets in our county. The asthma rates are extremely high, particularly in children in certain areas of the county, and cancer rates, certain types of cancers are significantly higher. Further research needed on the county structure issue, such as the feasibility study. While Johns Hopkins didn't specifically name it as a feasibility study, everything that they've said is what a feasibility study is. Communication difficulties, as I said, of the 49 municipalities. Some differences. The League of Women Voters is a consensus study directly addressing the question of a need for a county health department. As I said earlier, Johns Hopkins study is not. Although the issue was raised by the survey that Johns Hopkins performed, the survey only, I believe that they had 1,200 respondents to the survey. And ironically, the demographics were women between the ages of 30 and 75, which is pretty much the League of Women Voters. So we were, you know, they felt that we kind of skewed the results of this study a little bit, but we were the ones who actually responded. And there was significantly little response from certain areas of the county. So again, you know, a larger feasibility study would need to really address the survey question. The other part that I thought was important, the Johns Hopkins chose to do comparable counties outside the state. And we looked at comparable counties within the state. Currently, up and running are 6 county health departments. As you may or may not know, there's Montgomery County, Bucks County, Philadelphia, and Chester actually surround Delaware County. And so there, when we were doing our study, the League study, we really looked at those health departments because we thought they were most comparable to the laws of Pennsylvania and to some demographics and things like that. And where Johns Hopkins did look at demographics and financial issues in choosing their other comparable counties, choosing them outside the state, we thought might have been a little difficult for people to equally compare. So when we did the League study, and I just bring up the budget issue because this is time and time again one of the biggest issues with the county health department issue we found. And when we've done programs throughout Delaware County to other groups, it's constantly like, how much is this going to cost? So I threw this slide in just to kind of give you an example of what we did in our study. And we looked at it nationally, so we have data on that separately. But from Chester County and Montgomery County, we looked at their 2005 budgets, which at the time we did our study was what was available. And so there, and we looked at the population, and the actual cost per person in Chesco was $4.79. That's what the county actually had to put in, and $2.78 for Montgomery County. When you look at the total cost of the health department, for Chester County was $12.4 million, and Montgomery County was $10.2 million. The majority of those costs are covered by outside categorical grants from the federal government and fees and acts that come under Pennsylvania laws of Act 315, Act 12, and Act 537. And those laws actually have to do with environmental, Act 12 and Act 537 look at environmental issues, and you get some funding for that also. So when we look at this, that's how we, if you've heard some of our data that we've said that's how we get that it would cost the average citizen in Delaware County $2 to $5 to have a health department. Does anybody have questions about anything I've said so far, or this part? This is usually when people have questions.
Just a quick one about that chart. It says total costs and total revenue, that section, they're identical. Is that, am I,
Yes, they have to balance their budgets,
okay.
so that's part of Act 315. So at the end, they have to come up with a way to make sure they're balanced. The other interesting part, and it has actually changed, and here we have bioterrorism, but because of H1N1 and then other terrorist events, both Montgomery and Chester County since 2005 have each received $1 million a year for pandemic preparedness. Delaware County has received about $200,000. So that's a significant difference.
I have a question as well, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time in the presentation to ask it, but is there data about Delaware County residents tapping into the neighboring community health departments? Because I know when the H1N1 vaccination took place, until we actually had it available in our township, there were all the ads to go to Chester County to get the vaccine. So it makes me wonder, are we driving up neighboring communities' costs, or, you know?
Well, H1N1 was a little different. And I don't know if you heard, I'm on the Strategic National Stockpile team for Delaware County, so I was actually involved in all that too. But anyway, but what happened with that comes from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. The distribution began with the Pennsylvania Department of Health. Counties with health departments had a slightly higher priority because they already had the system in place. But what happened, so there's no data. They did not collect data specifically saying how many people came there who weren't from there, although they did take information when they, the people did get their vaccines, but nobody's actually sorted all that information yet. So it's somewhere in the Pennsylvania Department of Health's data banks, but as of now, we don't know specifically how many got it there. The other issue is, and as you know, because we have, in my own case, I have 3 teenagers who go to 3 different high schools in 3 different counties. So my own experience with that whole thing was that, you know, my son who goes to St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia, he had the vaccine a week after everybody. As soon as it was available, Philadelphia had vaccinated, and that was partly to do because Philadelphia had long ago applied to the CDC to directly receive vaccine separate from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. So their shipment came separate. They got it right away. My kid was on this, you know, they were given second vaccines by the time other counties were initiating that. Montgomery County, you know, was a little different. Again, they have their health department. They were able to come in and help direct and have their nurses from the health department actually come to the sites, which slowed some sites down because Pennsylvania Department of Health required them, if you didn't have a county health department, to have one of their people initially at the delivery site. And then the whole registration process, who was eligible, and so that took a little longer for the Pennsylvania Department of Health to work out in some of the counties. So anyway, sorry if I went on too long about that part, but we don't have data. But it's interesting that you bring up that point, because we have heard from, in other presentations that we gave, for example, maternity and child care, a lot of people do end up going to Philadelphia just because we don't have some of those services here. Recently, I just read a document that said in the city of Chester, 60% of the women do not have prenatal care. They deliver the baby without prenatal care. So, you know, there certainly is people finding services elsewhere. I've also been told, in fairness, that some people come here to Chest Pen and different public health clinics that are nonprofits from other areas getting services. So, but unfortunately, there's really no good data on that. So, there is the league study did find financial advantages to a county health department, and the county loses out every year on millions of dollars of state and federal funding. And actually, this is one point that county council has said that they are realizing is becoming an issue. You cannot get federal block grants unless you're a county health department. That's just the way it works, unless you're structured to apply for that. And so we can't, for instance, if you did want to set up a clinic for pregnant women, you know, barring going through Chest Pen, which may be eligible, to get some money. If we had a county health department, they may actually get significantly more money because then we could contract them to officially provide those services. So it's just the way that the national system works. And then we have estimated that we have a 3-to-1 return on taxpayer money coming back into the county. And we feel that's significant. And that's federal and state taxes that we pay that we don't get coming to the county now because we don't have the structure that provides for that money to come here. And then the county loses, as I said earlier, $1 million in emergency preparedness funding this year alone. And then for the local municipalities, some, and every municipality is different. The 40 that actually have some public health structures, such as a board of health or a health officer, have a tax burden. Some, their books balance. Some have higher fees. The one thing about centralizing all of this is that those fees and things would be also incorporated into the county budget. And so, there would be even distribution of that tax burden. The other thing that's often asked of us is, what about, the employees of the municipalities and other things? And certainly what had happened in the Lehigh Valley and the Allentown area, that wasn't really a big issue because, they're forming this county health department and they still need these people to be part. So they just, in most instances, are hired into the county health department. And in some ways, it's actually better because it's consistent training. So every municipality has consistent training, consistent guidelines, and consistent paying of the people that work for them. Where in some municipalities that we interviewed, that was an issue. In many of the municipalities in Delaware County, health officers work for more than one municipality. So some can afford to have a full-time health officer. Upper Darby is one of those. But for those municipalities that don't, such as where I live in Media, that person works for 3 other municipalities. So, it's really not as much of an issue as people think. So Johns Hopkins said that findings indicate that although many public health efforts are ongoing and progress in some areas has been made, there is much need for a concerted effort by elected officials, county residents, government agencies, healthcare providers, nonprofits, coalitions, commissions, and all other interested parties to enhance the health of all Delaware County residents. And this is in their summary. We felt that this was pretty strong wording coming. They're basically telling us that we need to get our act together and we need to get some kind of better public health structure going in Delaware County. Johns Hopkins is, repeatedly in their report says, obviously you have to work with the structure and the abilities that you have. And so, again, they wouldn't come out and say that we need a county health department. But what they are saying here is, but we need to do significantly more than is currently being done. And the league agrees. I'm just throwing this in, not to bring another actor at the end of the play, but at the same time when all of this was coming out, and some of you probably saw that the Robert Wood Johnson County Health Rankings also came out right before the county was having their presentation with Johns Hopkins. And really interestingly, and I actually got to talk to some people at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation about this, but in the national press release, Delaware County was highlighted. Out of all of the counties in the United States, we managed to make their press release. And what they say is that the rankings show a sharp health disparities even in counties located right next to each other. For example, someone living in Chester County, Pennsylvania, which ranked highest in the state for overall health, has a better shot at staying healthy than a resident of nearby Delaware County, which ranked 36 out of 67 and has higher rates of smoking, adult obesity, violent crime, higher numbers of children living in poverty. And that's a significant statement for a national, nonprofit organization to come out and say that Delaware County, lacks in many of these areas. And although they highlight these areas, if you read further in the Robert Wood Johnson report, the report looks at 28 significant indexes that they included, and one of them is actually poverty, because poverty, as we know, indicates the ability to access services. So what does that mean? What's the next steps? We feel that we need to do a feasibility study, and that the county, as we said earlier, has the Health Advisory Board, but does not hold public meetings, and we feel that that should be occurring. And whether that Health Advisory Board can just be rolled into the task force recommended is really up to the county, but we feel that if that occurs, they need to be include other people throughout the county as part of that team. Since 1968, the county has sidelined this issue, and we feel that we must move forward to the 21st century. Forming the Department of Intercommunity Health was their way of kind of putting this on the back burner. And we feel that we tried it their way for 40 years. And now, there's the issues of what we just went through in the last year with H1N1, the issues that the county faces with terrorism, and the basic issues of what public health really is, of the things that we're facing with obesity and asthma and environmental hazards. They're numerous, and an organized, centralized health department is one of the ways that you can have a coordinated response for those. And as I mentioned, 40 municipalities with boards of health need to have be active partners in this process. We feel that, up until now, they haven't been really part of the process of determining what would a county health department look like, or what we should be including even in interim until we can form a county health department. If we started today, it's a 2-year process just to get all the paperwork done, to do all the studies, to do all the things to form a county health department. It took Lehigh Valley 10 years to get this whole thing going. And I have a bet with several people from that area that we can do it in 5, but I don't know. I might be optimistic at this point. So our final thoughts is that health affects some of us some of the time, but public health affects all of us all the time. Delaware County is the largest county in Pennsylvania and the United States without a county health department. And Pennsylvania ranks nationally in the ratio, last nationally in the ratio of public health workers to residents. And we throw that in at the end to remind you that Delaware County must rely on the Pennsylvania Department of Health, who work very hard, and I admire the work that they do, but they just don't have enough resources. And as we saw, it's really stretched. All Pennsylvania Department of Health could really do during the H1N1 was do what they did, try and get the vaccine out there. If you had other services that needed to be met at that time, you were going to wait a little while, because all of their resources were taken to use that. Another example I give of that, particular to Delaware County, is, and some of you may remember this, the syphilis epidemic that we had in the county several years ago. And at that time, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, to respond to that, had to take 20 public health workers from the other state health centers all over Pennsylvania and take them to Delaware County for a year to respond to that. Recently we've had spikes in gonorrhea. It took 9 months for a coordinated response to occur to start to decrease those rates. And public health works. Obviously, the syphilis epidemic ended when we had the 20 health workers coming here. The gonorrhea rates decreased once there was somebody focusing on that. But to have a system that's totally reactionary is, going to cause deaths at some point, because we can't, respond in public health that way. Okay, I'm all done. Any questions?
Well, first, before we open it up for questions, let me thank you again for the very stimulating presentation. And I do want to open it up very briefly for questions. We do have a time constraint. My understanding is that there is a meeting of our Township Board of Commissioners in this room coming up in less than an hour and a half from now. So we do have to clear this. Before I ask my colleagues on the board here if for their questions, there are other people. Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue? Okay, seeing none, then I'll open it up for questions or comments from the board here. Anyone? Well, I have a couple. And let me, you've alluded to the fact that we're dependent on the state there are several references to the state in your presentation, and the amount of revenue that we don't get back from the state for the tax dollars that flow out of Delaware County. I would imagine, given the fact that there are 49 municipalities in Delaware County, that in any crisis, or even in an ongoing public health situation, that it's very difficult for the state to efficiently deal with 49 different municipalities rather than one countywide entity. Has anyone, to your knowledge, sounded out the state on their position with regard to a county health department? I mean, have they expressed a position either through the state's Department of Health or even politically at the legislative or executive levels?
They're not allowed to comment on whether counties need county health departments. They have a group. The Pennsylvania Department of Health can't say to Delaware County, you need a county health department. They're basically forbidden to say that. They can say that there is some gaps in services or things that they can provide, but they cannot specifically tell us that they need a county health department. So that was one of the issues with Lehigh Valley and Allentown. Allentown actually had an advantage over Delaware County, and their conversion to a county health department was a little easier because they're one of the 4 cities in Pennsylvania that is recognized under Act 315 as a city health department. So the other ones are York and Lancaster. And so yes, they can't say it, and they can't tell us, they do have an office for Act 315 health departments, and so in the case of Allentown, they once they got the approval, and Act 315, it's a little different. You can have a referendum, but there's no petition for the referendum. You can have county council can straight vote to have a county health department without putting it to the voters, or they can have a vote. So for the Act 315 health departments that went to a straight vote, and that's what happened in Allentown and Lehigh, then they can directly go to the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and at that point, they will help them and identify the services and things that they need that aren't currently being provided by the Department of Health. But until that point, that doesn't happen. Now, have people told me who work for the Pennsylvania Department of Health that we need a county health department, since I'm on video? But no, they can't say that.
Can't say it officially. Okay, now you also mentioned the Robert Wood Johnson, and that's, I guess, the foundation that did those rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they give out a lot of money on an annual basis, and I imagine the feasibility study that you've referenced a couple of times in your presentation would itself cost money to do. Mm-hmm. Is there any likelihood that, or has anyone done any preliminary exploration of the chances of getting some foundation to grant the county money to do, or some other organization or consortium of organizations to do the feasibility study?
Yes, we've told the county that there is money out there to try and do this. The county actually had the state of Pennsylvania pay for the $50,000 study for Johns Hopkins. So Delaware County didn't pay for that out of their budget. What happened in Allentown is that Allentown was lucky because they have the Dorothy Pool Ryder Trust, and that paid for the millions of dollars that this has taken to educate the public and for their studies. But there is money out there, but the county would need at some point an official entity to go and write all these grants and find some way to do that. But
I'm not sure that that's true. I think a consortium of NGOs that were interested, or even townships like this one that was interested, could write the proposal. I don't imagine we would get a grant without at least an endorsement from the county council or something like that. But,
Well, that's actually what happened in the 1968 study.
mhm.
That's exactly what happened. So the Citizens for Public Health actually did that. They formed this group, they incorporated, they hired staff, they did all that, and they did their study.
I mean, I spent enough money on Band-Aids in my life. Robert Wood Johnson ought to be willing to give us something back, so.
Yeah, and it's Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has, we did not specifically ask them. They would be big on research and maybe helping us on the fringe of this issue, but whether they would give us directly money to do the feasibility study, we'd have to have another group ask them that question.
Well, I certainly do think it's worth exploring, and for whatever it's worth, I'd be willing to work with whatever organization or organizations that are willing to pursue that path, because I don't see the feasibility study itself getting done without outside funds.
Yeah, I think the League of Women Voters and us probably agree with that, and that's probably our next step is working towards, if we can't get the county to take that step themselves, then we plan to do that separate from the county. And then the other issue, which is like in Lancaster, they also had United Way in Lancaster actually paid for their study,
Right.
done by Drexel. So there's certainly plenty of resources out there. You just need a group of people willing to get together to pursue that end of it. But until this point, until the league finished our consensus study, which was finished in the end of 2009, we didn't feel we could go out there and start to do that. But I think that that's certainly a next step. And anybody wants to join, you can email me.
I will. And speaking of email, you were kind enough to email me your PowerPoint presentation, and I shared that today only with two of our members who were not able to be here tonight. And if I may, I'd like to share it with the rest of
And there
this
is,
group,
I'm going to give you this packet. I didn't copy this, but there is information here. There is also information on several other websites I can send to you. So
Thank you.
if that's helpful.
And absent any other questions, I'm looking at the clock right behind you, and we do need to move on.
Yep. I
Ms.
understand.
McCluskey. Please.
Rosemary, this existing Citizens Advisory Committee,
The
are-
county, yeah.
right, are they the right people to move this effort forward?
The county health advisory committee was who the county entrusted to choose Johns Hopkins to do the study. And so the people that are on that, I certainly think that they're all, qualified people. Whether they're committed to forming a public health department, I'm not sure if they are. But there's only, I believe, 5 people on that advisory board, and it certainly does not, I think, a true representation of the county. So I think the current board would have to be adjusted if they really wanted to move this forward. But, again, we don't have, they don't even have public meetings and no public records. We can't even read what they do. So to comment on what they're doing, I don't know. But to say what I know, that they were the primary group that actually read all the RFPs that came in. And there was 3 of them. So Drexel, Johns Hopkins, University of Pittsburgh, I think were the 3 primary ones that had come in. Okay, I know you're busy, so.
Thank you again,
Please,
and
feel free
let
to email me if you have other questions.
Let me add a word of thanks to Galen McCluskey, who is a former member of this Board of Health, and for helping to bring this presentation about. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
At this point, I'd like to move on to Article, Chapter 115 in the Township's ordinances, which deal with animal control. As you may recall, there have been some issues in the Township with regard to incidences of domestic animals being bitten by rabid animals, and the Dr. Len Donato, who is a veterinarian, sitting to my left, and I made a presentation to the Township Board of Commissioners on this on this issue, and a ad hoc committee of this board consisting of Dr. Donato, Dr. Offit, Dr. Humphrey, and Dr. Ballard have gotten together in between our meetings and worked to draft some revisions to strengthen, designed to strengthen Chapter 115. And I'm going to ask Dr. Donato to take the floor first as perhaps the lead writer of the revisions, and take a few minutes and walk us through what we have in front of us. Thank you.
I was thinking I would just go with each article and go over those somewhat quickly, and then if we have more in-depth questions about it, we could certainly do that.
Before you start, let me point out that there's an extra sheet that you've had at your places that includes the violations and penalties, paragraph 115-17, which was not included in the packet that was mailed out to us. So that should be added to your packet of materials regarding the revision. Sorry, Dr. Donato.
Oh, okay. So the article starts off where it just goes through some basic definitions, and one of the things we wanted to add, it starts in Article 2, as referenced, is that we wanted to have licensure for cats as well as dogs. 115-2 requires a vaccination and licensure of dogs and cats. That was one significant change from the previous ordinance. In addition, in Section A, we also say it shall be unlawful for any person to own, possess, maintain, regularly feed, house, or keep any dog or cat unless that cat is in essence vaccinated and licensed. And the big change is with the feeding. We mainly did that to address a stray cat, a feral cat issue. As we go through, we go to 115-3, and in essence talks about what happens when the dogs and cats are unvaccinated. In 115-4, we start to talk about animals that have bitten and confinement procedures. And not too much has changed here from the old ordinance, but in essence more for an educational comment here, is that if an animal is doing the biting, that animal is going to be quarantined for 10 days. And the reason for that is that the animal can transmit rabies in that 10-day period if the virus has affected the brain. At the end of that 10 days, if the animal truly had rabies, it would pass, it would die. So that's the logic behind the 10-day quarantine for an animal that did the biting. We go to 115-5, reports of animals bitten or injured. Now this is a little different than the previous article in that if an animal has a wound or bite and it's not known where that comes from, it has to be assumed that the animal or animal that's scratched or bitten was in contact with a rabid animal, because we just don't know most of the time. The main change there in 115-6 is that it was previously required, if the animal that received the wound was unvaccinated, it would have to be quarantined in a veterinary facility for 6 months unless the owner made application to the Board of Health here. We've changed that to match the rest of Pennsylvania, where they can actually quarantine the bitten or scratched animal at home. And that just makes it a little smoother and consistent with what the state law currently is. And there, in that article, there are a number of different restrictions related to that quarantine. If an animal has a wound of unknown origin or bite, but is vaccinated for rabies, it still has to be under quarantine. It's just that quarantine period is only 90 days instead of 6 months. That again is a state law currently. Many of the other changes that we had were in the chapter, let's see, we had 115-7 mainly talks about dogs at large and saying that we need to make sure that we're keeping them leashed. And 115-8 makes reference to disposal of the dog's excrement. 115-10, whenever this was something that was changed significantly. Previously, if there was a confirmed case of rabies in Radnor or the surrounding townships, that the Director of Development could issue a leash law or a keeping of cats inside, not even leash, just inside, for those cats that go outside, as well as dogs. In this case, we state that the Director of Community Development shall immediately issue a declaration reiterating and stressing the prohibition of domestic cats and dogs from running at large. And that's important because the previous wording made it almost elective, and in this case we're saying that there does have to be a declaration. Then we have 15-11 just saying that any injury to humans from animals will be unlawful. Seizure and redemption in 115-12 did not change too much here. That was mainly with the seizure of animals. And pretty much everything else is the same. We have enforcement and violations and penalties, just to keep this short. And this ordinance, for the most part, remained intact except for those few exceptions that I mentioned. And that is some of the work that we did as a committee.
Okay, I'd like to open it up for comments and questions, but before we do that, I know that you had received some comments from Amy Wishner, who could not be with us tonight. Are they incorporated in this draft that you have?
The comments that another board member, Amy Wishner, had, again, just mainly cleaning up certain parts of the language, and if that's something we want to go over now, I'm certainly happy to, but I feel like we probably need to get the rest of the board to make their comments as well.
I think that's correct. I just wanted to make sure that you had those
I do.
comments. Let me open it up then for questions, comments. Dr. Humphrey?
Yeah, I think this is a really nice document. I did want to clarify one thing, and it's just a semantic point. On 115-10, which we characterize as public notification of a confirmed rabies case, maybe in the narrative we should say, the Director of Community Development shall immediately report that a case of rabies has been confirmed and issue a declaration, because we don't say in the text that we're confirming that. It just clarifies that. That's the only comment I have.
Any others?
I have a comment. It's on, again, on 15-10. As far as one of the issues brought up from before was bringing this to the attention of like putting it in the press and like as far as where this confirmation and declaration would be, how is that going to be made? And it's just that is such that was one of the hot topics that we were discussing as far as making this public, and just as far as how we would carry out the plan.
That's an excellent point. I'm not certain that these ordinances go to that level of specificity, but I think we can certainly insert language and see how far it takes us that for a minimum, the report that Dr. Humphreys has described, that there has been a case of rabies, and then the declaration could be on the township's cable channel and in the local newspaper.
Actually, I think that was addressed in the original.
I was going to
version that
say,
came out that it talks about means of an announcement in a newspaper and general circulation within the township, and we talked about this and had considerable back and forth in discussing this. We talked about the possibility of putting it on the local television scroll, which would be an immediate way we would notify the public, and then eventually maybe putting something in the paper in a timely fashion. I had a sense that the consensus of the committee is we didn't really want to dictate to the township how they should go about making this presentation to the public, but we felt that it should be made. It would be up to the township to determine the best means of doing this. Yeah, I don't know if is that the
I agree.
consensus?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? I have one on 115-10, and it concerns the word reiterating. My concern is that domestic cats are mentioned in 115-10. This is reiterating and stressing the prohibition for domestic cats and dogs from running at large. Now, domestic cats are mentioned in this paragraph, but they are not mentioned in 115-7. And unless I'm mistaken, that's what I thought the word reiterating referenced. So I don't know what the thinking was of the ad hoc committee on that.
I think part of what we were struggling with was the concept that in the previous, or the existing language in the ordinance, it said every time we learn of a confirmed case of rabies in our township or in a neighboring township, we would, be empowered to issue the declaration about this, but that in reality, there is always a documented case of rabies here or in a neighboring township. So I think that was part of it, but I agree, we're reiterating something that wasn't iterated anymore with all the iterations of the ordinance revision.
How about advising? If we issue a declaration advising and stressing prohibition. I'm not sure if that addresses your concern, though.
Well, Again, I think reiterating raised the question was, as Dr. Hoff has indicated, where is this iterated in the first place? And I didn't find it, so that, I think that,
Well, again, in one of the
advising would
previous
go in that
versions-
direction. I think maybe directing is a little stronger, and that would be language that I would prefer.
I think
but-
reiterating is a vestige left over from one of the previous
Yeah.
versions that we were working with.
The other, in the list of definitions, we have feral cat defined correctly. However, there is no language in the rest of the articles that references that anything be done except insofar as you could indirectly construe the words regularly feed and everything that follows thereafter to include feral cats or any other wild animal. But I think we might want to consider being more specific with regard to that.
Maybe a simple solution is just to add, after that clause, keep any dog, cat, or feral cat, just to make a distinction.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful
I think
or not.
the main issue is feeding them, because that's contributing to our township's problem, the fact that some people are ill-advisedly and probably with all good intentions, feeding the feral cats. I wouldn't want to discriminate against cats. My concern would be with the feed any mammals, actual wild mammals. We wouldn't want to include birds in that, I assume. So we can look at that language as we go back to this. In 115-6, a wild carnivorous mammal, and I believe that groundhogs have been known to be vectors of rabies, and they are not, strictly speaking, carnivorous. So we might want to look at some way of including groundhogs, at least in that. And my last point with regard to 115-6 is that under subparagraph B, we don't specifically prohibit or say anything that prohibits the owner of a home quarantined animal from taking that animal outside at any time, even on a leash. And I think this is where I would think that we need some level of specificity, because someone could say, well, the dog has to go outside to relieve itself, and it was on a leash and there was no possibility of having contact. But that's not the spirit of the home quarantining, I don't believe.
But I think on section 1 under B, it says the animal must not have any possibility of getting outside of the designated room. Which is pretty confining.
I saw that. Yeah.
But if you think it needs to be.
I read that as saying that the animal might escape from that rather than being taken outside by its owner. Again, that's something maybe the ad hoc committee could look at.
Yeah, we'll have to add in something about taking a dog on a leash, because if you have a 60-pound dog in one room, it's not reasonable to think it's going to go to the bathroom in there.
Right. Now, as far as, unless there are more comments or questions, I want to review next steps. I think, again, the ad hoc committee has done a tremendous job in doing this. We aren't ready to bring it to the Board of Commissioners at this point. I think there are a couple of things that need to be done. We need to add some of the things that we've talked about today and make the appropriate changes. We also need, as has been pointed out, as we've discussed via email, to put this into the standard deleted, added format with brackets and that kind of thing to indicate deleted material, and so that's fairly standard in any kind of revision of ordinances or legislation. At some point, I will work, since I've done that before, I will work with whoever on the committee wants to step forward, or if it's more than one, maybe it will be Len, at least Len, and certainly others are welcome to join me in that process. But and then following the preparation of that version of the revisions, we should have a vote, and at that point the results of that vote can be transmitted to the Board of Commissioners with an appropriate covering letter, and our offer to meet with them to discuss it.
I'll get the original electronic document and manage all the formatting issues that were there, and then we can bracket it, red line it, whatever we need to do.
I guess this won't be track changes. This is something a little more formal than
Yeah.
that. But we should probably have maybe one intervening document before we do that, and just to discuss some of these points that were made tonight.
One thing I could help with is my new version of everything Microsoft, which messed everybody up with my Excel spreadsheet, is I can merge two documents and it'll highlight the changes for you. So if that's helpful, if I can get the original, somebody
That'd be
taught me
very
this,
helpful.
and actually it saves a boatload of time with, these numerous document revisions. But then if I have what we come up with, incorporating the comments from today, and then the original, I can try to merge those sections and it'll highlight it, so at least that's done automatically.
Right, great.
So I'm happy to help with that.
That's terrific. So those will be our next steps with regard to 115. The other biggie for our agenda today, which was a very meaty agenda, is the discussion of goals and objectives. And again, we have a terrific board here that's willing to step forward and do things above and beyond the call of duty. In this case, Dr. Offit took the initiative to format the goals and objectives on an Excel spreadsheet, and we all submitted our responses to that with some fits and starts, because I for one couldn't figure out how to do it at first, but then I did, and we have the results of that, which were sent to us by Dr. Offit, and we actually wound up with, on your count, with I guess 5 goals for the year beginning September 2010 and ending June 30th, 2011. So if you would like to just walk us through those, Dr. Offit, and we'll discuss them
Sure.
after that.
I know when we had received the original request from you was to come up with 5 or 6 possible things to focus on for next year. So there are actually 6, because 2 of them tied for fourth place. And like I mentioned in the email, I know not everyone had the opportunity to do this because of day jobs, but this is still a live program, so I can incorporate those if somebody feels strongly about a certain ranking. And then it'll automatically recalculate the ranking, so that's not a problem. But for the purposes of today, where we stand now, The first goal was to finalize the rabies ordinance revisions for the Board of Commissioners, which we just spent some time talking about. The second was to help manage the feral cat population in a humane way, and the items associated with that. The third was continued education of the residents of Radnor on animal-related matters. And then briefly tying for fourth was the marked reduction in junk food available in school cafeterias, as well as encouraging more physical activity during the school day. So that may actually be a symbiotic goal anyway. And then what came in fifth was about Lyme disease and deer ticks with the community education and so on and so forth. But a lot of these also might be short and sweet, so it may be something we would be able to get to as the year went on anyway, or they may naturally dovetail into one of the other goals, it looks like, where we would want to focus our priorities. So,
Thank you again. Any comments or questions on the material we have in front of us?
The feral cat issue I just wanted to talk about because there's been a number of concerns from the people who will typically manage feral cats on how we plan to do this. And the important thing that I want everybody to remember, and it was outlined very nicely here, to help manage the feral cat population in a humane way. And that will be happening. We're going to make sure it's done. Where the previous plan was to just catch the cats, take them to the SPCA. Unfortunately, many times in those cases, the cats are euthanized, which, you know, there's probably a better way to do that, which is we first, in the ordinance, put forward the feeding issue. And what that's going to do is get everyone to have responsibility for the animals that they're taking care of. And then there are a number, beyond that, then there are a number of programs that are available in Delaware County and through rescue groups where we can get those cats spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and then many of them end up getting placed in homes, which is great because I have my own cat that was a feral cat at one point, and he's great. And a lot of these cats are wonderful, and I think that's part of the end point for me as a veterinarian, wanting to do that. But it's not as if we're going to take away the food and starve out all these feral cats. I think it just has to be a stepwise plan where they're going to be taken care of in a humane way, as we outlined there. And that's going to happen.
Thank you. I think you've pointed this out and several others, you, Dr. Donato, with regard to that goal and objective that begins with finalizing the rabies ordinance, and we're well on the way to doing that. But part of that would have to be our commitment to providing a good deal of public education in this area, because that's what leads to the problems, is the public not quite understanding why. It's important to keep their pets' vaccinations up to date, just to take one example, and what people need to do to maintain their pets in good health and to be responsible citizens when they become pet owners. Any other questions or comments? I have a note in mind with regard to 2 and 3 and 5, because the way those are written with, well, number 3 references what I just talked about, and number 5 talks about Lyme disease, which is certainly a perennial topic for public education. But I think that perhaps we could have just one overarching goal with regard to how we as a board see the need for providing guidance and public education with regard to how the township deals with animals, both domestic and wild. Because these issues, the deer, the signage, all the good work that's gone on with regard to that in the past are all, I think, interrelated items. And I would like to see, and I'll work on it too, an overarching goal statement that has to do with animal and animal-related matters, and then subordinate objectives that reference things like the revised 115, the deer interaction with cars regarding to signage, and the number education of residents, and the Lyme disease issue.
Are you almost looking for, in essence, like a mission statement for that, all the animal-related issues, and then some objectives?
Well, I think it's a little less grandiose than a mission statement. I can't think in my own mind of any better language than an overarching goal with subordinate objectives that we might see as achievable within the time frame that we're allocating for this. The other thing, again, has to do with collapsing perhaps the two number 4s, the one that's tied with the original number 4, both have to do with childhood obesity, I think, or related to that. And perhaps we could collapse those and then have an overarching goal and subordinate objectives that have to do with the food that's available in cafeterias and educating children and families, or working through the school district to provide that education. And then the other objective would have to do with physical activity. And I'm also intrigued with the fact that this is here, and the First Lady of the United States has apparently, I think I'm correct, Michelle Obama has done some work in this area, or has developed this as an initiative coming out of her office. So we might want to keep that in mind and look and see what they are doing, and it would be terrific if we could actually develop something and then get her here, because that would highlight the issue.
I have a comment too, is that one of the MMWRs that Larry sent us from June 4th was talking about adolescent health, and both the unhealthy dietary behaviors and the physical inactivity were listed in the MMWR. I didn't get to read the total text, but there might be some things, some issues or activities that are in there as far as these two goals that we have.
You're referencing the Youth Risk Behavior Survey?
I believe that's what it was.
Yeah, that's, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a biannual event coming out of the CDC, and unfortunately Pennsylvania does not participate as a state. When I last worked in Philadelphia, the city of and school district of Philadelphia did participate as an individual. The school district did as an individual school district entity. When I got that, it was the night after. It was right after I had been at a meeting with Dr. Groveman, the superintendent, and Mr. Schellenberg, the principal of Radnor High School, were at that meeting as well. And I had an opportunity to talk about it with them, and I emailed it, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, to both of them, and they in turn passed it on to relevant others in the school district hierarchy and in Radnor High School's hierarchy. The high school has continued to do a survey of its own along similar lines over the past few years. The middle school has a different kind of survey geared, as you might imagine, to that age group. But they have also been looking at it. And I just think that we as a board need to interact with, because you're right, there are issues. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey does not addresses dietary issues, exercise, but carrying weapons into school, suicidal ideation, sexual activity, drug, alcohol, all the kinds of risks that our young people are exposed to, and unfortunately too many are engaging in, which jeopardize their health and the health of the entire community. And in part, that's the Radnor REACH program, which Amy Wishner is representing this board on, because their concern is with the drug and alcohol abuse. So yes, I think we do need to look at those things and figure out how we can reach out to the school district, and we'll be interested in monitoring what they are doing with the CDC survey and their own internal surveys. I thank you for bringing that up. Now we've got, while Ms. Burns has just talked, I did email the board with regard to replacing me for next year as the board's liaison to the Environmental Advisory Council. And Ms. Burns has graciously agreed to do that, and I'm grateful for that. So we will coordinate that handover, and that will take place. And I thank you again, Genevieve. Now we've got some issues, and I know we're here a long time. Before I turn it over to Larry for his announcements and health officer's report, I would like very much, but I will understand if we can't do it, to hit the ground running in September. And the only way I can figure out to do that is by having a meeting in August. Typically, this board, which is, well, for example, the EAC does meet throughout the summer, although sometimes they need to cancel one of their meetings due to a lack of attendance. But we do not meet in the summer. I think we have enough weighty issues that I would like to consider calling a meeting, and that would be the third Monday in August, which is August 16th. And I will get back to the entire board, since some members are not here, and canvass and see if we will at least have a quorum for that. And we'll just have to wait and see how that works out. I do think we have some issues that we need to get at least one additional meeting in on. Okay. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to ask Larry Taltone to give us his announcements and health officers report for the month.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hazen. I'm going to be very brief. I submitted my report for the month of May. I pretty much wanted to just submit it because we had such a long meeting tonight with one change. The special events, we had one, which was the rabies clinic, and the temporary events was two. We had the Jazz Festival, the 7th annual, and the St. Martin's Fair. They both were very successful. I do want to speak a little bit about the rabies clinic because we had so many related issues with animals. Last year we had 29 dogs and cats that were serviced or the year before last, by Dr. Donato at that time. This year's clinic, he spearheaded this clinic also, and we had 44, which is a 66% increase. And I'm very, very happy about that. We had a lot of help. It was a very successful clinic, and I'm hoping that it will reduce the number of incidents that we have to deal with this year. So it was very successful. His daughter, I keep forgetting her name.
Lena.
Lena, she was very helpful, worked the clinic with us this year. I thought that was a very positive thing for young people to come out and work. She very, very helpful. The second thing I wanted to talk about was there was a meeting today. I didn't have an opportunity to attend it, but about 3 years ago, the state Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture told local health officers and municipalities that there will be a time soon when we will be required to report our food inspections to the state so that they can make them available on the internet. To that end, they use a program called the Garrison Program. We met with them about 3 years ago, we meaning Radnor Township and all municipalities in this area. We took our IT person, or at least I did, along with us to look at their program. They told us there was 2 ways to comply with that, either tie into the Garrison Program, which would kind of take away some of our security, or we could mimic their program with their approval. We got that. About 2 years ago, we were ready, and we've been waiting for them to say, send us your inspections. At this point, there was a meeting today, and I'm hoping to contact someone tomorrow to find out where we are with that. So I know that it's coming soon, so that residents who visit this area, or if you visit Pittsburgh, or no matter where you go and you see a nice restaurant and you say, well, should I or should I not eat there? You can go online and see what their report was like. So those, with that, so ends my report, unless there's any questions for me.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I left the minutes at home from our last meeting, so we will have to review them at our next meeting. I don't have them with me. But if I did have them with me, or the minutes from even a previous meeting. Dr. Leader, you had offered to take the lead in, with regard to a student intern from Radnor High School. And if you could just take a minute or two to report on where we stand with that.
Sure. I was in touch with the woman at Radnor High School recently, telling her that we were still interested in doing this, and she and I are going to be in touch when they come back in early to mid-August, and she's going to be in touch with the interested juniors then, and we'll do some interviewing, hopefully, if someone's around late August, to someone to start in September. We have had at least one student who you have referred to me again. I've had the second student. We've had a few outside students as well through Radnor, not go through the guidance counselor, but just contact us directly. And so we already have a little running list of 2 or 3 students. But September is still my plan, if that's okay with everyone else.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a good target date to get that underway. You said something about juniors. The young woman who has emailed us several times is not going to be a junior. I think she was a freshman this past year, and so will be a sophomore next year.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky because she's been very persistent, and so we'll have to weigh persistence with school year. So I guess we just see what that little cohort of applicants looks like late in summer, and we can make a decision. And potentially we have 2. We'll see. Let's see how that works. But she's been very persistent, so it should be rewarded somehow, I think, but we'll see.
Okay, great. If there are no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting. I thank everyone for your enormous hard work. This is a working board, no question about it. And have a great July, and if things work out, we'll get together in August 16th. Thank you.